Nero is remembered as a monster, but the Great Fire of Rome raises a harder question. Was he the villain, or the scapegoat Rome needed? In July of 64 CE, flames erupted in the heart of the city and did not stop for days. Rome was a maze of narrow streets, tall wooden apartments, workshops, and stored oil, and fire loved every inch of it. Wind pushed sparks across rooftops, and panicked crowds clogged the alleys like a living wall. People carried children, idols, and sacks of grain, while others looted in the confusion. Ancient writers say the fire began near the Circus Maximus, where shops were packed with flammable goods. From there it surged through densely populated districts, swallowing temples, markets, and homes. When the smoke cleared, much of Rome had been reduced to black foundations and ashes. The disaster was so massive that it changed not only buildings, but politics. Nero was the emperor, and in Rome, disaster always searches for a face. Some sources claim Nero was away at Antium when the fire started and rushed back when he heard. Others paint a darker image, saying he watched the blaze from a hill and performed music. That famous story of Nero fiddling is an anachronism, but the rumor of him singing became a weapon. In a city built on honor, perception could be as deadly as proof. So, what do we actually know about Nero before the fire? He became emperor as a teenager, guided early by advisors like Seneca and Burr. Those first years were remembered by some as relatively stable compared to later chaos. But power in the palace is poison, and Nero grew paranoid and hungry for control. He clashed with the Senate, executed rivals, and famously killed his mother Agrippina after years of tension. By the early 60s, his rule was surrounded by fear, gossip, and resentment among elites. That meant the fire landed in a city already primed to believe the worst. Nero did respond with practical actions that even hostile sources sometimes mention. He opened public buildings and gardens for refugees and arranged emergency food shipments. He also launched a rebuilding program with new street layouts and stricter construction rules. Wider roads, limits on building height, and more stone and brick were meant to slow the next disaster. Yet rebuilding also created opportunity. An opportunity creates suspicion. Nero's new palace project, the Domus Aurea, rose amid the ruins like a golden insult. Too many Roman. It looked like the emperor was turning tragedy into personal luxury, even if the palace was planned before. The timing made it feel like theft of the city's pain. That is how scapegoats are made, when trust is low and symbols are loud. But did Nero actually order the fire? We cannot prove it, and the ancient sources disagree in tone and detail. Tacitus reports rumors, describes confusion, and does not claim absolute certainty. Suetonius and Cassius Dio include more sensational stories, and both wrote with moral agendas. Their accounts are valuable, but they are not courtroom evidence. What is clear is that Rome demanded an explanation, and Nero needed someone else to carry the blame. He chose a small, unpopular group that many Romans already misunderstood. They were Christians, seen by some as strange for refusing Roman gods and meeting in private. Nero's government accused them of arson, and the punishment was designed to be unforgettable. Tacitus describes executions that were theatrical and cruel, meant to satisfy public anger. Some were burned, some were torn by dogs, and some were used as human torches in gardens. Whether the charges were true mattered less than the message. The state could point the crowd away from the emperor. This is one reason the fire changed Rome, because it helped shape the early Christian story of persecution. It also showed how quickly an empire can turn fear into policy. Meanwhile, Rome itself was physically transformed. Rebuilding required massive money, and money had to come from somewhere. Taxes, seizures, and pressure on provinces increased, feeding resentment far beyond Italy. The fire also became propaganda in another direction, because Nero presented himself as a rebuilder of a greater Rome. He promoted new architecture, new public spaces, and a vision of a city that looked more imperial than republican. But if people believe you burned the house, they do not praise you for building a nicer one. In the years after the fire, revolts and plots multiplied, including the Pisonian conspiracy. Nero's response was more executions, more fear, and more isolation at the top. By 68 CE, rebellions in the provinces and defections by commanders left him politically alone. The Senate declared him an enemy of the state, and the imperial mask finally cracked. Nero fled, and he died by suicide, ending the Julio-Claudian line. After him came the Year of the Four Emperors, a violent scramble that proved the system was unstable. In hindsight, the fire looks like the moment the story of Nero hardened into a symbol. Rome needed an explanation for unbearable loss, and a villain is an explanation that fits in one word. Nero was convenient because he was already controversial and already accused of breaking tradition. Yet even if he did not start the blaze, he benefited from rebuilding and used blame strategically. That combination can feel like guilt, even when the match is unproven. So the honest answer is uncomfortable. Nero may be both scapegoat and monster, depending on what you measure. If you measure the fire's origin, the evidence is fog and rumor. If you measure the use of terror and propaganda afterward, the record is clear. Leaders do not need to light a fire to exploit it. They only need to steer the fear, and Nero steered it toward people with no power to fight back. The Great Fire also reminds us that ancient cities were fragile machines. One sparked in the wrong place could erase centuries of stone and memory. And when a city burns, politics burns with it, because grief demands a target. That is why the question still matters today. Not because we want to excuse Nero, but because we want to understand how narratives are built. Rome's writers shaped Nero into a warning about art, ego, and cruelty. Christians remembered him as a persecutor and a symbol of state violence. Senators remembered him as a tyrant who humiliated their class. Each group had reasons, and their reasons became history. The fire did not only destroy Rome, it created a story powerful enough to outlive the facts. And that is the real twist. The blaze changed the empire, but the myth changed the emperor. Sueño huer, Nero burned Rome. Escu needed that sentence to be true, because sometimes the hardest fires to extinguish are the ones inside a story. And if you want more stories like this, like the video and subscribe to History Refuge.